What's going on, boys and girls? It's me, Ben DPB, here with a brand new Ben Meets today. And today I've got a special guest. It's my first non-football manager YouTuber. It is Jonny Sharples. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very, very good. Thanks for coming on, dude. You're my first non-YouTuber. How does it feel?
Nerve-wracking. I've got big shoes to fill, I think. So hopefully I can do it justice.
Yeah, no pressure, no pressure.
No pressure at all. I feel like I'm getting a half-time football manager team talk there.
Well,
I'm glad you approached it in a calm fashion. I don't know how I deal with like assertive at this stage.
how you doing? Here you go.
Yeah, or aggressive. Yeah.
So, for people who may not know you, because I know you're not a YouTuber, if they don't know you, I'll be amazed. If they don't know you, tell us a little bit about what you've done and why you're so important to the FM community.
I don't know if important's quite the right word, but I don't mind. I don't mind that term being used. It's quite nice. I've done all sorts of things to do with Football Manager. I was in the Iain Macintosh book, Football Manager Stole My Life. So I did a little page in that. Then I was in the Football Manager documentary, talking about Gateshead and embarrassing myself by singing a chant I made up about a footballer called Wesley and Gobaheng. And then after that, I created a Twitter account for a new gen called Avicha Strock. Then his shirt was in the National Football Museum. And then, yeah, so I've done all sorts of different things to do with Football Manager, everything except YouTube, apparently. So,
One of the things I like to do at the start of the very show is add in a couple of icebreaker questions just to break the ice, just to ease you and ease myself in slowly to the show. So my first question, always my favourite one, what's your last meal?
I know you're a big fan of like true crime podcasts because you like Last Podcast on the Left.
I do.
And one of the things I learned from that, it's a really good podcast. I love true crime. Is that with final meals, they don't give you whatever you want.
I know,
I didn't know.
don't ruin the myth for me and you know that,
I
but
know
everyone else doesn't know that. Don't ruin
they
the
they
myth.
some states will only let you have $15 worth of food, which seems really
That's a
unfair.
KFC still a KFC.
Oh yeah, but they like some states will only let you have stuff that they prepare in their own kitchen.
Right.
I'd have if I had the $15 limit, I would buy $15 worth of salt and vinegar Pringles. If it was a $50 limit, $50 worth of salt and vinegar Pringles. Just I love salt and vinegar Pringles. Like if it was my last meal on earth, forget steak, forget fried chicken, forget whatever everyone else goes for. Just give me lots and lots of salt and vinegar Pringles, and I will die a happy man,
That
full
could be the
of
greatest icebreaker question I've ever heard. Salt and vinegar Pringles, you've heard
are
it here
just.
first.
Like the only Pringles I like are salt and vinegar ones. And like
Really?
Pringles follow me on Twitter because I bother them all the time with
How? Your Pringles
pictures.
following you on Twitter? How's that happened?
I kept photoshopping Pringles cans into photographs. So like Bobby Moore, instead of holding the World Cup, was holding a can of salt and vinegar Pringles.
That's a little
Like
bit weird.
the Statue of Liberty, instead of holding like the Liberty Flame, was holding a can of salt and vinegar Pringles. And like the painting on top of the Sistine Chapel that Michelangelo did, like God reaching for Adam. God was holding a can of salt and vinegar Pringles. So I think they just had enough and followed me.
This, this podcast got a little bit on the weird side. Only 2 minutes in, I must say so myself.
Yeah,
You've been stalking Pringles with pictures of people holding Pringle cans. That's a little bit weird. I'm not gonna lie to
my
you.
my Twitter stalking habits only get weirder from here.
Oh god, well hopefully we won't find any more out, but let's see what happens later on the show, eh? So another one for you, my friend. What's your favourite TV show?
Of all time, it's it's not cool. It's not like the Wire or anything like that. Friends is my favorite TV program ever.
Good choice, dude. Very good choice. I love Friends. So what'd your favourite film be?
I, 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 I've I'm gonna go with two. I,
That's
one I know I
cheating.
said
That's
well I
cheating.
know I
You
said
said your favourite
the
film.
films. I heard it. Like I know I said like my favorite TV program isn't cool like The Wire, but my cool answer to my favorite film would be Seven, like
Mm.
with Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman. It's like a proper film, like a modern day film noir sort of
What?
thing. Yeah, oh, it's so good. You can like it's one of them films with a twist, so you can only really watch it once, but then you can watch it with someone that's never seen it before, and you can like watch their reaction. My uncool answer would be, although it's got cool in the title, Cool Runnings. Love Cool Runnings.
Shankar, you're dead.
A film about a Jamaican bobsleigh team. What is there to not like?
Pepsi or Coke?
Boring answer. I don't drink fizzy drinks because they're not good. They don't sit well with me. We don't get along. If I have to answer the question of Coke or Pepsi, I'll go with Pepsi. I used to drink so much of it, and like I had to wean myself off it. Like trying to wean yourself off a fizzy drink with caffeine in it, like you would wake up with banging headaches, like the worst headaches I've ever suffered, just because I didn't want to drink Pepsi anymore. It's like if I was going to go through this pain for something, it should be better than not wanting to drink Pepsi.
Now, obviously, I've watched the documentary, shall we say, the alternative reality documentary. It's a very, very good documentary. You know, you're on there for a couple of minutes, and as you said, you do get a little bit of your football charm. And obviously, that was quite an impressive chance, shall we say. I mean, did you think of that on the spot, or did you think that one day sitting on the toilet doing a little bit of writing, and whatnot? How did that come about, that chant?
Well, I lived with two housemates at the time when I was sort of playing that particular save on Football Manager, and we would all sit around on our laptops and we would play three different individual Football Manager saves, and like three lads sat in a room together watching football, playing Football Manager. You're gonna find ways to annoy each other and brag to each other. So, I'd make up songs, I'd throw things at them, I'd do anything. And so when Wesley, like we're on first name terms, but when Wesley and Gobaheng was scoring goals, I made up a chant, and then I wrote about that in the book that I'd made up a little chant about him. And I remember being sat at the recording, and they're like, "I believe you've got a chant about Wesley and Gobaheng." And I imagine I didn't have a mirror, but I imagine my face just dropped. And then they were like, "Would you mind just singing it for us?" So I gave it a good go, and like I think I mumbled it out the first time I did it, and they were like, "Could you do it a bit louder?" And I'm just in someone's house. I'm in Kieran, who works for Sports Interactive's like kitchen, and they're like, "Just sing it a bit louder." And his family was still in the house, and they're like, they must have wondered what the hell was going on. And so I do it again, and they're like, "Oh, just a bit louder, a bit more clear." And then yeah, eventually just got the one take out and just you see it in the documentary, but I just completely break down afterwards, like thinking, what the hell have I done? But I think it makes for a good part of the film, and I think it sort of encompasses and captures what quite a lot of people that play Football Manager do, the sort of weird quirks that they do. But I was just, lucky in one way, but embarrassing in the other to be lucky enough to record it on actual, film footage.
To this day, I still have little interviews of myself when I'm playing the game. I genuinely sit there playing the game and imagine myself being interviewed by Sky Sports News. Now, obviously, you spoke in the documentary about your Gateshead save. Just to tell the people who may not be aware of that, who haven't read the book, what FM was that save, and how was the save? Where did you get on the save? How far did you get into the save? What did you win? Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so that was Football Manager 2010. So like 8 years ago now. It was when Newcastle were in the Championship the first time, well, the last time we were in the Championship. And I'd been over to Newcastle to watch them play against Preston. And when I got back, because I lived in Preston at the time, when I got back from Preston, I got my laptop out and say, well, I've been Newcastle enough times on Football Manager. I'll be Gateshead because they're, across the river. So I started it up and went to, they have the, parent club relationship with Newcastle. So I thought, I need a striker. I need a striker that'll join me. I'll go across to Newcastle. And they had Wesley and Gobaheng sat in their reserves. So I made an offer for him and got him on loan. And I think he scored a good like 20, 25 goals that first season when they were in what was the like conference premier then. Um, and yeah, he scored a hatful of goals, and then his contract expired, and so obviously he's got his house in the northeast. He's got his mates there. He don't want to move away, so I thought I'll tempt him back, and he joined me on a permanent contract. And yeah, same thing again. Scored the goals. I think that second season we probably got into like the playoffs but missed out. Third season again scores loads of goals. We storm the division. We get promoted again out of League Two into League One, and then another promotion, and he's scoring goals all along the way. He scored in like every division. Then in the Championship, we struggle the first year, struggle mid-table second year, third year we're promoted. Like Wesley and Gobaheng by that point, he's probably a League Two striker at best, but there's no chance when he's scoring in every division. I'm not taking him to the Premier League with me. So this guy completely out of his depth in the Premier League, but he's coming with me. So that last year We're in the Premier League. I think we finished about 17th, so we didn't get relegated. And I think he scored one goal in the Premier League. I think it was a penalty against Middlesbrough. But the important thing is he scored in every single division, and by that point, I loved him. He was a proper cult hero. So I got a shirt printed from Gateshead with his name on it, and I went on a website called Cult Zeros, who sort of print t-shirts with footballers' faces on them, and you can like add a little line of text underneath it. So I got a t-shirt to when he became Gateshead's all-time record goal scorer. I thought I need to commemorate this. If this was real life, there'd be shirts, being sold, dodgy knockoff ones outside the stadium. There'd be people on eBay making their own Redbubble, that sort of thing, Etsy and all that, making their own t-shirts. So I thought I'm going to do this properly. I'm going to get one made myself. So I got that as well. And yeah, it was like I say, it was probably at best a League Two striker, but when you get that much involved with a save on Football Manager, you're going to want him to be commemorated and memorialized in some sort of way. So that was just my little way of doing that. But in terms of what we won nothing. We got promoted a few times, we got a few titles. Um, the relationship with Newcastle for Gateshead really helped because you could get players on loan. And then I remember we had Fraser Forster came, Colaccini when his contract expired came,
Oh, wow.
Joey Barton, Kevin Nolan came, Aaron Spear, who was like a wonder kid in that year, that game, he came across as well. So yeah, it was really good. But then um, I had a player called Kermit Erasmus, he's South African. I think he plays for a team in Holland now. But I got him and he was really good. I think he scored a lot of goals when we were in the Premier League and the Championship. He was like that level of player. And he got within one goal of breaking Wesley and Gobeheng's club record. And I couldn't let that happen. So I stopped playing the game and just never went back to it. So Wesley will always be uh, will always be Gateshead's record goal scorer, and that's forever now. As good as Kermit Erasmus was, and obviously, like you say, as amazing as his name is, similarly Wesley and Gobeheng has a pretty good name. Um, yeah, I just can't let his like name be scratched from the record books and have someone else take it over.
Obviously, you're the alternative reality documentary talking about Gateshead, but what you're probably more famous for is your career at Celtic, where you had a rather, shall we say, prolific striker in Ivica Struck. How do you know? This guy's goal scoring career was legendary, shall we say. He's even got his own Wikipedia page. He's got a Twitter page, nearly 4,000 followers, which is like 5 times more than what I've got. Do you know what I mean? I mean, the fact that a football manager reader's got 3,900 followers is insane. So why don't you tell us a little bit about you, man, and tell us how his career came about, how you signed him, and what he did for the club.
Yeah, like I think a lot of people sort of when you bring up what happened with Celtic, I think a lot of people assume that I started the game as Celtic, and in Football Manager terms, everyone's free to play Football Manager as they want, but if you start as Celtic, that's like playing a game on amateur. You're going to win the league every year. You've got decent money in comparison to what everyone else was. So to set the record straight, if anyone thinks I started as Celtic, I didn't. I started as Dynamo Dresden, in the Bundesliga 2. Um, so I started off at Dynamo Dresden. This was Football Manager 2013. So I had some fun
Also,
with
you
Dynamo.
you were the original guy who invented the journeyman saved them by the sound of things.
I don't know if I can claim to be the original, but like I started off at Dynamo Dresden, and I started off with them because I went to see someone called Amanda Palmer in concert, and she's in a band called the Dresden Dolls. So I thought I'll be Dynamo Dresden. You need those little links. Um, and this was Football Manager 2013, like I say. So there's still like quite a few like old school players. So at Dynamo Dresden, I managed to reunite for one season only a strike force of Emil Heskey and Michael Owen. That
Oh,
was
wow.
quite a high point. I love Emil Heskey. He became my director of football at Dresden when he retired. Um, so I had a few good players. I had Thomas Nesid, the massive Czech Republic striker, who was a bit of a football manager, wonder kid, maybe like football manager 2011, 2012 that time. So he was at Dynamo Dresden. Never managed to get them promoted, got bored, went to Brighton, Lasted about 2 months at Brighton. It was a bit of a damned United situation, I think. I mean, if this was real life, they would probably make a documentary about my time at Dynamo, at Brighton and Hove Albion, because it was only 2 months, and then I go on to be successful elsewhere. But I think, yeah. And then I went to Hearts, and like with the aim of making Hearts the big team in Scotland. I think I signed like John Guidetti. He scored loads of goals in Scotland. Um, Lucas Fabianski came to play in goal for me. So I had a decent little team, but like you say, Celtic are far and away the best team in Scotland, and to catch them is really difficult. And so, because I finished second behind Celtic for 2 years and didn't win the cup because Celtic won the cup, Hearts sacked me. But Celtic must have seen something in that. I must have rode them closer than any manager had before, because then Celtic offered me the job. So I took over from Neil Lennon at Celtic, and yeah, like I say, being manager of Celtic in Scotland's pretty easy. You can win the league without too much trouble. Um, but I really wanted to try and win the Champions League. And to do that, you need a striker that's probably a bit better than Georgios Samaras. Um, so I went scouting all over the place, and one day a little report landed on my fictitious desk, and it was for Ivica Strok, a little Croatian 18-year-old. So I went and looked at him, and you get those little WNT things, the little green square. So I clicked on that, and Barcelona were there, and Juventus were there, and Chelsea were there, and I was like, oh, he must be good, but there's probably a good chance that he'll want to go and play for one of them. So I put my £5 million bid in, which is like the best bit of business imaginable in what was to come. And yeah, I know, like, I can click key player because he's going to be the best player in Scotland even at 18. If Chelsea are bidding for him, they might put youngster or hot prospect. So, give him the wages he wants and then a little bit more, give him a goal scoring bonus, give him everything. And yeah, he joined Celtic. And then the first full season he was at Celtic, we won the Europa League. He scored twice in the final when we beat Napoli 4-0. So I thought we got a decent little squad here. Like, I had Nathaniel Chalobah, who's at Chelsea now. He was one of my main defenders, and I had a few other good new gens. I think Scott Brown was still there. Liam Bridcut, who for some reason, I can't remember, I think he's at Leeds in real life. He was an amazing like anchor man in the midfield, like good enough to. It must be one of them things where his stats were sort of perfectly aligned to be as good as he was. But yeah, so the second season after we won the Europa League, we then went and won the Champions League. And yeah, then Ivica Strok was scoring like 50 goals a season in the SPL alone. And yeah, he was just phenomenal and yeah, unbelievable. And I just can't understand why he decided to see out his best years at Celtic. But obviously, we were winning a title every year, and he was getting 150,000 pounds a week. So there's not much temptation for him to leave if he's, guaranteed that much money. And he, like his goal scoring bonus, like 15 goals, you get £1 million. He's scoring like 50 goals, and he's not getting like £3 million for that. So yeah, it was just a wild ride, and he was at the centre of it all. It was amazing, lots of fun.
Did you get many clubs sniffing around him?
I think Chelsea, you get the press speculation. It's like Chelsea, when the transfer window opens, I think his name would pop up saying Celtic striker Ivica Strok's linked with a X amount of £1 million move to Chelsea and PSG. The only bid I can ever remember, I think we got a bid of about £30 million from Barcelona, and turned it down. This was probably 2020. 4-ish, 25, so he was still quite young. I think he would have been about 23 at that point. Yeah, turned it down, and he was quite happy that not quite happy that we turned it down, but he didn't seem to kick up too much of a fuss. And yeah, then I think that's the only bid I can ever remember. But yeah, it was easy to keep him happy, like I say, and it's easy to keep players at Celtic happy as a whole because you just say, if they come to you saying I'm looking for a new challenge, you just say, well, I think we can win the league, and they'll be like, oh, when are you going to win it? And it's like, I think we might win it this year, and they're like, all right, well, if we don't, be off, and then you do, and they have to stay. I think that the regens aren't too smart.
Was you tempted with a £30 million bid to accept it? I mean, I know it's very early to his Celtic career, but was there a small part of you that thought £30 million for a player in the SPL? That's a lot of money. You could buy 3 top players for that. Was there a
Yeah,
small part of you that was tempted?
I think it's the same with like the sort of stuff with Wesley and Gobaheng. Like once you've sort of developed that fictional relationship with them, and you want to see how far they can go, you want to keep them around. And like obviously he was, with no disrespect to my good friend and Twitter follower Wesley and Gobaheng, he was like 10 times the player of Wesley and Gobaheng,
Oh,
and so.
sacrilege.
I know. Hopefully he's not. Well, for your sake, I hope he is listening because it'll, one extra listener. But for my sake, I don't want him to unfollow me. So
If you do Wesley, make sure you follow me instead of him then.
yeah, that's a good trade, Wesley, if you're listening. Good trade. But like I say, I just wanted to keep him around. £30 million, like you say, that's good money for an SPL club, especially at that point because now, um, Celtic are one of the richest teams in the game, along with PSG and Arsenal, because Arsenal are always rich because they don't spend any money. But yeah, back then it would have been a lot of money and there would have been good regens to sign, but there was never really that temptation to do it. But yeah, I'm glad I didn't in hindsight because he
Yeah.
won me like 4 Champions Leagues almost single-handedly in SPLs and Club World Cups and all that sort of thing. And obviously everything that came afterwards, I'm glad I kept him around.
Now, like I mentioned earlier, the guy's got. I say the guy like he's a real person,
I talk about him like he's a real person. I talk about him like he's my friend.
but he's got, like I said, 3,900 followers on Twitter. I mean, tell me how that's come about. He's a bit of a legend in the football manager scene, so we say. There might be some people thinking, how the hell is a regen got 3,900 followers on Twitter? Now, he is very active on Twitter. We see him frequently talk, and he talks about the players he's played with, etc. Tell me a little bit about Ivica's Twitter and how he handles it and what he does with it.
Well, yeah, like I'd have obviously my personal Twitter account that I use. And when I was playing Football Manager, like normally I'd mock up pictures of or mock up tweets that he would have sent if he was a proper footballer and mock up pictures of him scoring goals and I'd tweet it out to my followers. I think my followers might have got a bit bored of it and annoyed by it. So I thought I may as well take that step and I may as well make him a Twitter account of his own because if he was a real footballer, he'd obviously have his own Twitter account. Pretty much every footballer has their own Twitter account, whether they run them or not, or whether it's, some PR person doing it for them. That's, an argument to have about that. But I thought if he was real, he'd have his own Twitter account. So I made him his own Twitter account. And it was sort of small, little bits, and I'd retweet the tweets off my own account every time he did them. And then one day, Iain Macintosh, who's like the daddy of Football Manager, in many aspects, came across it because he followed me, and he tweeted out saying like, "This is amazing." And then I think I got a flood of followers off the back of that, and then they sort of just grow sort of organically over time. But it's sort of like what I like to do is if it's sort of twofold. This sounds like I'm doing a sort of lecture on how to use Twitter, but like the advantages of it are twofold. One, that it gives me a chance to talk about my Football Manager save and what's going on with that. And like he'll talk about like the champ. I think the last tweet he did was about the Champions League draw, which I just had, and I drew Bayern Munich in the semi-final, and the other match is Wolfsburg against Hearts, and it seems a bit skewed towards I got the worst draw possible out of that. I'm sure Bayern are thinking the same thing, but it gives me a chance to sort of talk about my save on Football Manager and introduce like the players that I have, and he can talk about that. And then the other side of it is that I can parody football that's happening in the real world. So I remember uh, the end of last season, in 2016, when Aston Villa got relegated. Joleon Lescott tweeted a picture of his car because he was getting loads of abuse. So I thought, and then he did an apology saying, "Oh, it was my arse that tweeted that while I was driving my car, whatever." So I thought, right, I'm going to go and find a concept car from like the future, and then I'm just going to tweet a picture of that, and then Avicii can do his own apology saying that it was his arse that tweeted it, and that he's doing his best. So I think it's a good way to sort of add personality to an account, and I'm sure like there must have been people that had done it before, and done a Twitter account for a new gen. And I know now Gold, is it Golden FM has
Golden
the
F.
Regen Rovers. He has his Twitter account to his regens and stuff. I just think it's a really good idea, and it's like adds personality to things. Um, but yeah, at the time it's just a lot of fun, and it's just a way to sort of get that sort of followership and that sort of understanding of your game and make people laugh and make people smile at the same time, hopefully.
Now, even goes hit the Holy Grail. He's had his shirt hanging up in the National Football Museum. Now, tell me how that happened. Was you contacted by SI? Was you contacted by the Football Museum? Was you invited down there for the unveiling of the shirt? What happened?
So, like I say, I'll mock up pictures and then let Avicha tweet them himself. So I think one of the pictures I did was him having something in the National Football Museum, and then obviously I tagged the National Football Museum in it as much, well, in the to the tweet because I sort of want that line to be blurred as much as possible. Like, if someone was to stumble across it and not look at the picture properly, would they think this was a real footballer's Twitter account? So try and blur that line as much as possible. So I'll tag the National Football Museum into the tweet. And like they replied and was just like, oh yeah, funny. Hopefully with a bit more gravitas than that. But then they sort of followed Avicii off the back of it, and then maybe like 2 months later, they replied to the tweet again, and said, I think what they said was just, "Oh, go on then." So I was like, "All right, what does this mean?" And then they sent me a private message saying, "Can you send me your?" Well, they sent Avicii a private message saying, "Can you send me your email address?" And from that, I assumed that they meant my email address and not Avicii's email address because that would be weird. And then so they sent me an email going, look, we're having an exhibition on at the Football Museum. It's going to be about the role that football gaming has played in the real world of football and how it's evolved over time. So I was like, okay. And they went, have you got any Avicii stuff that we can put in the museum? Because I think it'd be we think it'd be a good exhibit. So I was like, yeah, I've got a Celtic shirt with his name and number on the back. And they were like, I'd tweeted previously a mock-up of a front page of a program from when Avicii had his testimonial, and they said, "Can you print that off and give it to us?" So I thought, I'll go one better than that, and I'll make an actual program. So me and a friend got together and we made some football programs and got them printed off professionally and then sold them and then gave one to the National Football Museum. So yeah, for like 9 months, I think it was, in this exhibition, there was Avicii Strock Celtic shirt and his testimonial program in the same building that has like the football that was used in the 1966 World Cup final
Oh my god.
and like the European Cup winners medal that Liverpool won in like the 70s and stuff. And so, like there's stuff from Messi and Pele and I think Maradona's shirt when he did the Hand of Gods in the Football Museum as well. And I think, it's only right that a player as good as Avicii Strock should have his, shirt in there alongside lesser players like Pele and Ronaldo and people like that.
You must be immensely proud that the fact that your shirt, or rather Avicii shirt and Avicii's program made it into the National Football Museum. I mean, that is insane to think that a guy from a football game has had a football shirt and a mock-up of a football program from his testimonial has made it into the Football National Museum. I mean, that to me is just insane. I don't understand how that's happened. I mean, wow, you must be immensely proud of it.
Yeah, it's been incredible. Like everything that happened from it. It's like when we sold the programs, we sold them for charity, because when you've got a testimonial, like Michael Carrick, he had his testimonial recently. The money he raised from that goes to like the Manchester United Foundation, and so I remember when Alan Shearer had his testimonial at Newcastle, the money goes to charity. So it was only right that when we made these programs, we sold them and like 100% of the money from selling them went to a charity called Calm, who are a suicide prevention charity aimed at men, because that's a massive issue. And so yeah, it was like there's so much to be proud of from what happened with Avicii, like the money raised and the attention raised for worthwhile cause. And like you say, going in the football museum, it's just like sort of when I was sat playing like Championship Manager when I first started, just like messing about cheating to get the best players onto my team and stuff. I can't imagine like if I went back to like 10-year-old me as he was cheating to get Alan Shearer to come and, play for every team that I was managing and said, one day keep at this because one day someone that you don't even know exists because he doesn't exist yet and he'll never exist. He's gonna have his shirt in the football museum and that's all because of you. I like would have like been what? And then been like, well, that sounds pretty cool. I'll carry on playing it then. Yeah, it's just mad in many ways. It's just unbelievable. But like you say, just really proud of being a part of it and being able to sort of get that attention and get that sort of acknowledgement of something that you've done. It's just, yeah, it's really incredible and humbling and makes you proud. But yeah, and then going to the launch of it, I remember we were invited to the obviously the exhibition launch at the Football Museum and canapes and drinks and stuff. And I'm there like, I'm only here because of a Football Manager regen. And it's like Miles was there and like the guys that do like, is it Foot Scout or the FIFA thing, Foothead? Like the guys behind those websites and like EA's like person that's in charge of like looking after the UK and I'm just there, and I'm only here because I played too much Football Manager, and like having this reception and like going up and like standing through like the patrons of the National Football Museum speeches saying how proud they are to host this exhibition. It's like, you've never picked up a computer controller in your life. Just let me go up and see these exhibitions. And like going up there and like wondering because I hadn't seen it and like you go up to this floor and there's like exhibition after exhibition. There's all these games from like the Atari and the Commodore and things that you can stand and play on and just hunting round for where this shirt was hung up. And I remember it was quite far, like close to the back, but luckily it's where FIFA 17 was and like loads, or FIFA 16 as it was. Loads of people were like gravitating towards that because it had just been released and like having my shirt hung up next to them. I remember some guy come up to me and go, are you Jonny Sharples? And I'm like, yeah. And he went, oh yeah, I remember you from the Football Manager documentary. And it's like I'm at a launch of an exhibition and someone's recognized me, and this is surreal. But yeah, it was immensely proud moment and just really incredible thing to be part of, really.
Nice little segue there to the Football Manager documentary, by the way, my friend. You clearly got experience in doing this. So obviously, in regards to the documentary itself, obviously you sat around with the three wise guys,
Yeah.
etc. The interview itself was only a couple of minutes long. How long was the actual whole interview process? Because I could sat there listening to you talk all day, as I have done here, talking about your Gateshead save and your love for Wednesday and stuff. So I've never been involved in a documentary before. Is it literally a 10-minute conversation, or is the interview process pretty extensive?
From the book, The Mirror, a few years ago, picked out 5 extracts of like what they considered were the best stories from it. And they were the 5 of us that ended up going to like being picked for the final 5 on like X Factor or something. But we were like the 5 that got picked to go down to London to record this thing. And I got a message on Twitter going, "Are you Jonny Sharples from the Football Manager book?" And this was a researcher for the film, and I was like, "Yeah, that's me." Like, right, we're making a Football Manager documentary, blah blah blah, embargo, whatever. Don't talk to Miles about it, even if you meet him. They paid for all my travel, which was wicked because they best do because I'm the star of the show. But but I get there about 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning. And I remember I'm booked on a certain train to go home. And the train they booked me on is about 6 o'clock at night, 6:30. It's like, well, this is going to be a long day if that's the train I have to get when I go home. So 5 of us are there. And one guy's like, I have to get interviewed early on because I've got work in the afternoon. So one guy gets interviewed, someone else gets interviewed, and they have to set up the shots and they have to get the props ready. Like if you've seen the film, you'll see Adam, who's the guy who had the police called on him. He had to have like a computer set up for him so they could record the bits of him and get changed into a suit and mock up like someone knocking on the door and have close-ups of Hibbs scoring because I think that's the team he was. And so it takes a long time to get those scenes ready. So like Adam records and like the other guys record, and I'm the last record of the day, and I've come all the way down from Manchester. Like it's a long way. And like all I've eaten is a Tesco sandwich because they bought us sandwiches, like living the high life. I remember being sat there all day and like it was exciting. We got to look at Prozone. It's when they first linked up with Prozone.
Oh wow.
So we got like a sneak preview of like what Prozone looks like from the professional side of things. So what the actual clubs that use it get to see, and like it was a really incredible experience. And like it was good, cool to be around like Miles for a few hours and Kieran for a few hours and find out what Kieran does. And Kieran, I remember, had like the new Football Manager on his laptop, and it was like amazing. It's like looking into like the Ark of the Covenant or something. It like glows back out at you, and it's like really fun. But like it was such a long process, and like the takes that they do, they take a few takes, and it's like I remember they did things called noddies, which are like when we're sat around that table, all they'll do is like just say, "Can we just film you nodding?" And that you'll just have to nod for like a couple of minutes while they just film
Bloody
you. You're
hell.
not nodding at anything. You're just nodding at the mere concept of nodding. So like you're just there, just nodding, like smiling and nodding, like you're reacting to something, but you're not. So they can cut them into like one guy's talking, he's like, "Oh, like I loved it when I signed Cherno Samba," and they've got cut to you nodding, and all you're nodding at is just someone saying, "Just nod, nod, nod." It's like, yeah, yeah, pretend, think of Cherno Samba. So yeah, it's a long process, but like I said, like the documentary is incredible, and like the people they pulled together, like it is really good, and it was such a fun experience. But yeah, long, long, long day.
That's interesting. Very interesting. The inner workings behind the Foot Magic documentary. Very interesting.
Yeah, they should have got me to do like the DVD voiceover. I think they missed.
There was some girl did it, wasn't there? There was some girl did.
Vicky McClure, who's in This Is England and Line of Duty, she's the one that does
Is
the
that the
voice.
one that does it?
Yeah, she does it, and
I
I
had
don't
no
she,
idea it was her.
don't know if she's a big Football Manager player, but or they just got in touch with her agent.
Now, recently, I heard that you've done a little bit of work for BBC World Services. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Whenever I get a message like, would you want to talk about Football Manager? I'm always saying yes because like you'll sort of appreciate once I get on to talking about Football Manager, it's tough to get me to shut up. So any opportunity to talk about it, I think my girlfriend's thankful that I'm not talking at her about it for a couple of hours, so she gets a bit of respite. But like I got a message from a producer at the BBC saying, "Look, I produce a program for the BBC World Service." And I read something you wrote about Avicii Strock a couple of years ago. We'd love to get you on the program to talk about it. So I was like, yeah. And they were like, well, you can Skype us, or you can FaceTime us, or you can come down to the studio. I'm like, I'll come down to the studio. Yeah, that's fine. I'll come down. I don't mind coming down to the studio. I'll come down for a bit. They wanted me to talk about Avicii Strock and like how he'd used it to raise money for charity and used it to raise awareness for things and like what it meant for like how what Football Manager is, because like this goes out all across the world. The BBC World Service, like the guy was saying, they get 50 million listeners, mainly in Africa, and they were like, there's guys in Africa that absolutely love football but will have no idea what Football Manager is. So can you explain what Football Manager is? And I was like, how long have you got? Football Manager takes a lot of explaining.
Basically, an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, just a load of stats. It's just like flicking through things. It's like the most boring thing in the world if you're not into it. Like Tony Jameson, who is in the Football Manager documentary, he's a stand-up comedian and he did a whole stand-up show just about Football Manager, and he makes a joke of like, you would not get any other profession as dry as football management to have such an addictive game about it. Like you would not get Office Manager, where your best hope is to get a wonder kid who's labeled the next like Bill Gates. It's like you would not get any other career. So like Football Manager is incredibly dry, it's incredibly nerdy, and try and explain that over the radio to 50 million people across the world. So I went down and did that, and like it was amazing. Like I love Football Manager. I love talking about Football Manager, and like to do it on something as big as the BBC. Like it's not like BBC like prime time BBC One, like sat there chatting about Football Manager, but like to be on the BBC
It's
and to
bigger.
talk.
It's bigger.
Oh
It's
yeah,
got
I
50
suppose like
million
50
people.
million people.
It's
Yeah,
bigger.
like. But just to be on the BBC and to be sat in a studio like in front of a microphone that says the words BBC on it, talking about a footballer that's not even real, that loads of listeners probably won't really understand what the hell's going on and why you love this combination of pixels and statistics so much. It's a real like honor and like I keep using the word, but it's really humbling and a real privilege to be able to do that, especially on the BBC. Like BBC is like one of those things that's a constant, and it's like one of the best institutions and most important things that we have. I'm not going to go all nationalistic, but one of the best things about this country is that we have the BBC and we all contribute to it, and we all get a little bit of a sort of a say on what happens, and we can write in and complain. And to have that and to be able to be part of that in some tiny little tiny form in the corner of a tiny little studio, yeah, it's wicked. It's like one of the best things. So that's it'll be on iPlayer and stuff if anyone ever wants to go back and listen to me talk even more about Football Manager. If you've not had enough of my voice already, then yeah, it'll be on iPlayer at some point. And you and 50 million people across the world can listen to it.
Now, I know you're not currently a YouTuber, we'll get into that in a second as well. But do you watch any YouTube, apart from mine, of course? Do you watch any other YouTubers? I mean, do you have a particular save that you like to watch? Some guys like the Journeyman, some people like the Experiments, some people like watching the Manchester United saves like Teach FM done, or the Bayern Munich save that Bood FM's done. Do you have a particular save or type of football you like to watch?
Well, first things first, there's some good plugging in there from you. I hope those guys appreciate you mentioning their saves. First things first there. They owe you a big thank you in the comments section after this or on Twitter. They owe you a massive thanks. But it's all right. I love experiments. Like I love my whole thing with Avicii Strock is like blurring those lines and making your own reality. I love experiments where people have put, like yourself, you put Diego Costa for one season. His choice, not yours. One season in China and see how that pans out. And I love like Loki did 500 years in the future and Liverpool still not being able to win a title. And interestingly, on my Football Manager thing with Celtic, Liverpool still haven't won haven't won the Premier League either. So I think it might be hard coded. Get in touch with the guys at Sports Interactive. Tell them to take that code out that is stopping Liverpool from winning the Premier League. But like I love experiments. Like just seeing what people can do and the ideas that they come up with and putting managers in charge of clubs and like making, was it Loki or was it another person I watched? I can't remember. So apologies if it's not. And, you know, like someone made it so you got 6 points for a defeat. And I think it was 6 points for a defeat, 4 points for a draw, and still 3 for a win. And to see if the AI would appreciate that you changed the rules so the best way to win the Premier League was to lose as many matches as possible. And that's an amazing thing to do. It's an amazing idea. One that I sort of wish that I could have come up with because, you know, the way you can present that is brilliant. And but the AI just had no idea what was going on. And it's like, so I think it must have been this season's one. I think Hull win the Premier League with only winning like 2 matches. And like Man City get relegated along with Arsenal maybe, and I want to say Tottenham, because it just couldn't cope with this new concept. I love stuff like that.
Work like that.
I think Squawker, who I'm going to give a plug to now, they do loads of experiments. Like they did a thing where a whole team of Kantes and a whole team of Ibrahimovic's and see how that sort of pans out. Yeah, I absolutely love experiments. So keep them coming, keep experiments coming, do them as weird as possible because the weirder the better, you know, as far as I'm concerned. Just with experiment videos, don't just do weird stuff anyway.
I mean, if you're into experiments, obviously FM Scout is a good place to go, and also there's a guy called Jen Caldo. He does a lot of experiments. He's very, very good. It's just given the fact that you are clearly very good at talking on the microphone and talking in general, and very confident in front of the camera, as you saw in the interview. Have you any plans or any thoughts about going into YouTube now or at some point in the future?
I'd have liked to have done. I think that's the one thing that's missing with the whole Avicii Strock thing, that it never sort of migrated onto YouTube or never sort of birthed, I suppose that's a terrible term, onto YouTube. But I think at the time, obviously that this was 4 years ago that I started the Avicii Strock thing, and at the time it's like I don't know how this is going to go. I didn't even know like the whole Avicii Strock thing had happened, and I think at that time as well I sort of had whether the YouTube community around Football Manager wasn't as big as it is now. I sort of had some, not misgivings, that's the wrong term, but sort of maybe a wrong idea of what Football Manager and YouTube and their relationship would be, because I thought Like a lot of tutorial videos is probably what you get on YouTube about
Yeah.
Football Manager. And maybe that's what it was like 4 years ago. Maybe that was the big thing. Like you guys, like obviously FIFA's massive on YouTube, but the stuff that you guys are doing, like hopefully one day will be just as big as the FIFA guys are, and more people will be able to go into it, and you'll get real, driving subscribers and viewers. But like back then, I didn't think there was a YouTube community, so that's why that never really was an option. Similarly, like you just don't know where this save's gonna go. It could have like imagine people like watching me like sign Emil Heskey at like Dynamo Dresden, going, "What the hell is this guy doing? No, this isn't what I subscribed for," and missing out the whole journey of Ivica Strock. They would have never seen it because they got annoyed at Emil Heskey. But yeah, like I say, like it would have been something good, and like to sort of suddenly start it up and going, look, I'm 30 years in the future and Ivica Strock's dead good, and there's that risk that I know there's like stuff where like people say like you use the in-game editor and you edited. I won't mention the names of the people that have had those allegations made against them. You can cough that name all you want. I'm not saying it. Like there's always been allegations that like these people are cheating and these people have pumped up the stats of these guys, and like if you come into it in 30 years time, you've got this amazing guy at Celtic that's turning down moves to bigger clubs. There's definitely going to be those allegations made to you, and it's like, well, you didn't see the whole 30 years beforehand because I'm too stupid to realize that YouTube's a big thing. So yeah, I would have loved to have done it if I'd in hindsight, which is a wonderful thing, if I'd known how it would have gone, then yeah, I'd have definitely loved to have YouTube this whole thing. Like a guy messaged Avicha the other day, but Avicha doesn't reply to people that ask him about Football Manager because he doesn't exist in a world of Football Manager. He exists in the real world. So I replied to this guy going, no, look, like I'm sorry, like Football Manager and YouTube was never really a thing for me. Like, and this is why, because I didn't know this had happened. So I would have loved to have done it. But can you imagine it now? It's like I'm in 2058. Like, welcome to episode 749. We're just starting 2058 season. Please.
Really think you'll be surprised how. I think either of you just start a YouTube save now. So, hello guys, I'm playing FM13. I'm in the year 2058. People would lap that up. They really would. And either of you just to do a player review, of Avica's career, just to even, and if you put on the FM Scout website or YouTube page, and just do a play review of the Avica's career, I think you would absolutely smash it.
Yeah, it's something to consider.
Now, you for your sins, and it literally is for your sins. You're a Newcastle fan, So my question is, for a lad who lives in Manchester, I'm assuming you're from Manchester. Why the hell do you support Newcastle United?
I've had a journeyman career of a life, I suppose. I was born in Ascot, so not too far away from where you are, because my geography is that bad. So down south, and then I moved to Southampton when I was quite young. Then I moved to Preston, and then I moved to Manchester and Salford now, which is where I live. At no point in my life have I lived in Newcastle, so that doesn't really answer that part of the question. But Euro '96 happened. Is the answer to that question. It's like, why do I support Newcastle is a question that I've asked myself many times over the last 20 years. But like Euro '96 happened, and the absolute star of Euro '96 was Alan Shearer. And the next time that he was in the news after I watched Euro '96, he was joining Newcastle, and it's his fault that I support Newcastle United, because it is a fault. I don't care what anyone says. It's his fault I support Newcastle. And Alan, if you're listening, because he follows me on Twitter, and that's my proudest moment.
Shut up, does he?
He follows me on Twitter, and it's absolutely amazing.
How did that happen?
I wrote
Forget the Football Manager. How the hell does Alan Shearer follow you on Twitter? How much did you pay him? Was that an accident? Did you press follow rather than block? What was that?
I assumed it was an accident when I got the notification that Alan Shearer was following me. But I have a thing. Bear with me. It's not as dodgy as it sounds.
I don't know what this thing is.
On New Year's Day 2016, I tweeted Alan Shearer, my absolute footballing idol, and said, Alan, next time you're in Manchester, do you want to come for a brew? Right. Simple message. Don't know why I did it on New Year's Day. I think I was filling my calendar in for the rest of the year. Wanted to pay, pencil him in for a specific date. Didn't reply. So like 2 weeks later, I tweeted him again, replied to my original tweet, so it's in a nice thread. I said, Alan, still not heard back from you yet. Just wondering if you wanted to come for a brew next time you're in Manchester. Again, no reply. This carries on almost throughout the whole of 2016. Every couple of weeks I go, look, Alan, I know I think one of them says, Alan, I don't know if you like biscuits, but just let me know when you're coming. I'll get some biscuits in. Just a Fox's selection. I'm not made of money. Stuff like that. Just like, Alan, let me know if you need sugar because I take sweetness. So I'll have to buy some in. You don't have to reimburse me if you want it. Didn't reply. The didn't reply bit will become a theme of every single tweet that I sent him.
I can tell.
But yeah, so I kept tweeting him. And then, so he sort of has a vague idea of who I am and hasn't blocked me, which is good. And then it got to like the 5 year round. So the story takes a bit of a twist and a turn, but it came to the 5th anniversary of Gary Speed's death. And I wrote a little article just for like my own blog, my own Medium account thing about sort of like suicide and stuff. It's not a happy subject, so I'll try and move it on as quick as I can. But like suicide,
I'm a proud Welshman. The loss of Gary Speed, who was our manager, and he turned Wales around. I was devastated. I was absolutely devastated when he lost. So you can talk about Gary Speed all day, mate. I'm more than happy to listen.
like suicide is like a massive part of my life. Like my brother a few years ago took his own life. So it's like a massive part of my life. And like Gary Speed was another absolute childhood hero of mine. So I sat down and I thought, I'm going to write about, what we can learn from what happened with Gary Speed and how we can better approach mental health and better approach depression and suicide, because Gary Speed's like a massive name in football and it's such a tragic turn of events of what happened. So I wrote this blog and I just tweeted it out. It was on that Mental Health Awareness Week, I think, or Suicide Prevention Day, one of those things. And so I just wrote this thing and tweeted it out, and then and it got shared a few times. And then I get like, I'm sat at it was a Saturday, I remember it. I was sat on my sofa and I get a notification. It says Alan Shearer followed you. And so I remember holding the phone up with the notification, just showing it to my girlfriend, just deadly silent. And she's like, what? Dumbfounded, like, I've got this notification. I'll be like, oh, what shall I do? Shall I message him? And my girlfriend's like, don't message him already. Like, after our first date, you didn't message me that quickly. So don't be messaging Alan Shearer that quickly. So I leave it and I think maybe he followed me by accident. Blah, blah, blah. Then I get a DM from him. I'm like, well, this is taking a turn. Maybe he's finally accepted my invitation to come for a brew. So he messages me and said like that's a really good like piece of writing you did. You do a really good job raising awareness. I was like, oh, thank you. And I don't know if that came across in the message, that voice, but that's the voice that it was typed in. So yeah, like Alan Shearer followed me and he's followed me ever since. And he sent me he sent me a birthday card for my birthday at the end of last year.
No way.
Which is like my sister messaged his agent and said, would Alan Shearer send my brother a birthday card? So his agent said, yeah, who is he? And my sister said, oh, he's Johnny Gabriel on Twitter. And apparently his PA went, oh yeah, we know who he is. So I don't know if that's a good sign.
We know all about him.
Yeah,
we
know him.
Already lined up.
Yeah, so it was my 30th birthday. So my looks betray my age. I look like a child. So he sent me he sent me. I remember we were sat in this restaurant for my 30th birthday with the family around me, and my sister just hands me this envelope and says, "This isn't from me. I'm just the messenger." So I was like, "Oh, maybe it's from my nephew. Maybe like she's been handed a card to give to me." So I open it and it says "Happy 30th birthday" on the front. I'm like, yeah. Open the card and it says, "To Johnny, milk, 2 sugars, please. Alan Shearer." I'm like, well, that's a pretty good going. I've taken that as him accepting the invitation. Still not sent a date. He hasn't replied. But yeah, that's why Alan Shearer follows me on Twitter, and Alan Shearer is why I support Newcastle.
I'm a massive Luton Town fan, and I used to, like you did, tweet Cam McGeehan, who's a Luton Town player. He's like 22, 23, on a regular basis. Said, oh my God, Cam, you're so amazing, you're so great. And then one day, like you, I got a notification, Cam McGeehan has followed you back. And unlike you, I was not quite so cool, calm, and connected. I DM'd him straight away. Oh, Cam, thanks for the follow back, mate. Much appreciated. Absolute legend. Huge fan of yours. And I checked my Twitter about 15 minutes later. He done followed me.
Press the wrong button.
So we've heard about your exploits, or rather your fantasies over Alan Shearer. But without knowing who you signed and someone who you're going to sign, do you think you can step next season? And more importantly, what's your prediction for next season?
I think we can. I think we can stay up. We've got one of like when we got Rafa Benitez. I won't lie. I was worried that he would walk away when we got relegated, and I'm going to own up and admit that for that reason, last year when we got rid of McLaren, I sort of wanted Moyes because I thought he'll stick with us if we got relegated. Benitez wouldn't. And then obviously Benitez did. Moyes went to Sunderland. Moyes got relegated. So,
And then he
people
left.
people make mistakes. Luckily, I'm not the one in charge, so I didn't actually have to make that decision. And for once, Mike Ashley made a good decision. So Benitez is obviously such a good manager. He'll be a draw for a lot of players to come and play for us. And, he'll set up right. And the way we were set up last year, we were reasonably defensive sometimes. We played with two banks of four almost, and then one behind a striker. So that way will hopefully serve us well if we carry on playing that in the Premier League. And I think we can stay up. They'll think, Burnley might struggle next year, especially if they get rid of Michael Keane and they've not got someone to come in. Swansea again, they could struggle as well. Palace, it depends who they get in as manager and stuff like that. So yeah, and Watford, they've got so much, turbulence. I know they've got Marco Silva, who obviously was really good at Hull. So yeah, there's people, that might be a bit worse than we are, and I think we shouldn't be banking on other teams to be worse than we are. We should be as good as we can be, but you've got to have that luck and you've got to have that sort of thing. So next season, I'd really like us. Well, I'd really like us to win the Premier League, but you've got to be realistic, haven't you? You've got to have dreams. You've got to have dreams. Leicester dreamed, but we've yeah, I can see us sort of, first things first, you've got to finish 17th if you want to stay up. Anything beyond that, I think what we can really push for is like, 12th, 13th. It's not, not the big league, the big dreams and stuff, but you've got to sort of consolidate yourself first and foremost and then move on from there. And there's no reason why we can't be at the level of someone like Southampton in a couple of years. And it's again, that's Newcastle are a decent sized club, and is Southampton what we want to aim for? But yeah, that is what we should be aiming for. And
Now, the last question I'm going to ask you is regarding Czech Tiote. I mean, this isn't going to be a downer way to end the podcast because to me it's going to be a celebration rather than a sit and let's get upset about the guy because it's incredibly sad to lose someone so young. But the guy was an absolute monster of a midfielder for Newcastle. We all know for that goal against Arsenal in the comeback. And he was wanted numerous times by Manchester United and Arsenal, etc., who did want to sign the guy, but for one reason or another, the move never panned out, never happened. But just how hard has his sudden death hit the Newcastle fans? I know you're a Newcastle fan yourself, and I can't imagine what it's like to use a guy that not only played for you so recently, but had such a big impact on the club. He was there for what, 7 years? He was at Newcastle. He's a big player. So, what sort of impact has that had on the Newcastle fans?
yeah, it's like tragic, completely sort of devastating to get the news through. And it was weird because the news sort of filtered through slowly on Twitter, and you know what Twitter's like for
Yeah,
rumors happening, and these rumors were coming from sort of low level. I know that like sort of the secrecy that they have in China and the sort of way that they regulate their internet and their media and stuff like that. So you will get things slipping out slowly, but they were coming from like unverified accounts, and sort of the way Twitter is, you don't know whether you should trust that, especially with stuff that happened, like around the Euros with like Forest Echo News and people making stuff up and
yeah,
like the whole fake news thing. You don't know. It is. One, it'd be a sort of sick thing to make up, but two, such a random, weird player and person and circumstance to go for. But at the same time, you need that verification. And then when there was a lot of distrust about it, and then when it was confirmed, yeah, it was just sort of an outpouring of grief from every sort of Newcastle fan and follow person that I follow, and the club, and then journalists, and then fans of other clubs, because he was such an important player. There was a time I tweeted this when it happened, and it was agreed, like, and in articles that I've read since, that there was a time when Cheick Tiote and Yohan Cabaye together, like going back to Football Manager, like a deep line playmaker, a ball winning midfielder, they worked so well together, and they were like two of the best midfielders for maybe it was only for like 3 or 4, 5 months in one season, but there was a time when that partnership was so good. And you could, like you say, there was like off the back of that, Yohan Cabaye got his move to PSG for a decent amount of money. It didn't work out for him, but he got that move on the back of how well he was performing alongside Cheick Tiote. And Tiote was linked with Chelsea, and he was linked with Arsenal, Man United. And there was a good reason for that. He was a really good player. And towards the end of his Newcastle career, he definitely had his head turned by, the money in China, by the end, the money in the Middle East, and he's a footballer. He's got a short career. They deserve that money where they can get it, especially when you're not playing as much as he was at Newcastle. And he'd had his head turned earlier, a couple of years ago, by the likes of Chelsea and Man United. But that's just sort of, tells you how good he was for those years, that he was linked with that move, and he was good enough to go and play for those clubs. And if he got to one of those clubs, he could have been still now one of the better players that we'd ever had. But sadly for him, it sort of dwindled down, and he didn't deserve that, because he was really good for those years, and he did score that amazing goal. Like, I went back when the news broke about him passing away, I went back to, rooted through my tweets from, 2000 and whenever it was, 2011, that Arsenal match. And like, literally looking at the timestamp on the tweet, it was like 10 to 5 at night. That's the last minute of a Saturday night match. And just all I tweeted was the word Tiote. And that's just summed it up. Like, there didn't need to be any other words after that goal was scored. Like, we come back from 4-0. He only scored 4 goals in his whole career. So for one of them to be that good, that important, was testament to him. And yeah, it was just absolutely tragic. It's like you say, to have someone so young pass away in any field, but to have it that close to Newcastle Hearts was really quite devastating.
Now, thank you for that very honest, mate, answer regarding Cheick Tiote. Absolute legend at Newcastle, so much appreciated. But without any further ado, I'm going to bid you adieu. We're going to quickly close the interview out. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, hearing you talk about your work with the Sports Interactive documentary for Football Manager, hearing you talk about the BBC World Services, hearing you talk about your career at Gateshead and your career at Celtic. Was fascinating. But do you want to give yourself a little shout out for your social media or anything else you may want to talk about?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Jonny Gabriel. You can follow Avicii Strock if you want bad photoshops and weird Football Manager jokes. Avicii Strock 10, and the number 10 is really important, because there's a lad just called Avicii Strock that doesn't want you to talk about Football Manager with him. And as well, like, obviously, like I say, we've done a lot of work with Avicii Strock and a charity called Calm, who are a suicide prevention charity. You can follow them at the Calm Zone, and they're really good and really important work that they're doing as well.
Well, there we go, boys and girls. Another episode of Ben Meets Over, my first ever non-YouTube, an absolute belting interview. I'm looking forward to getting other guys on here. My aim is to get not just YouTubers on, but bloggers, website designers, website owners, database editors. I want to get everyone on. This isn't going to be a simple YouTuber show. I want to get every single person on. And at a date of recording, which is the 8th of June, I've recently put my application to get the show on iTunes, which should be massive. So fingers crossed, my friend Johnny will hear the show on iTunes as well as on YouTube, if all goes well, provided I don't hear my show go, oh my god, there's too many swearing, too many expletives. We're not letting you on, so let's see what happens. But anyway, you guys have been listening and watching me, Ben DPB. Thank you all for your love and support. It's been much appreciated. But don't forget, before we go, Dioch.